Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be teaching you how to create the illusion that you're standing in a hallway using one-point perspective. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is change the size of our canvas. Now, you're going to want to maximize the size of the canvas, but what I would like you to do is make sure that whatever you do, you use an even number of pixels up here. For instance, I'm going to move this canvas out to 1200, or you could even keep it to 1000 pixels, but you're going to want it in even numbers, not 900, which would be an odd number. We want to use 800 or 1000 to set up this canvas. So I'm going to go to resize, and for my horizontal, I'm going to pick pixels. I'm going to unclick maintain aspect ratio because I want to make sure I can determine exactly the horizontal width as well as the height. So I'm going to pick 1200, and then for this one I'm going to pick a number, probably 800, to keep it even. Alright, that gives me a nice rectangle that I can work in, and you'll see why that becomes important when we start to put the ceiling tiles in. But one thing I want to point out is that you can see as I move this cursor, you can see that little red bar moving across the top. This becomes nice when you want to measure exact positioning of your cursor. Okay. Same thing is true on this bar. You can actually see where your cursor is positioned along this ruler, and that becomes a really nice addition to Windows 7 Paint program. Alright, so now that we've got our canvas set up, we're going to begin this perspective design, and we're going to start with the line tool, and as usual we're going to start with our sketching line, which is just a simple 1 pixel thickness, and I'm going to go up as far as I can to that corner, and I'm going to start from the corner and cross my line off the bottom at this corner. So I'm going to drag and drop. Then I'm going to come up to the top right, and also as soon as it's on the paper, drag, or on the canvas rather, I'm going to drag and drop corner to corner. And what this is going to do is going to first of all tell us where the absolute center of the paper is, but also it's going to give us our one-point perspective layout so that we have a wall here, we have a wall here, we have the ceiling, and the grid on the floor. Okay. So let's go ahead and start with the ceiling grid and do that one first of all. Alright, what's going to happen on the ceiling grid is, again, we're going to sketch this out, and I like to use a 1 to set it up, a 1-line thickness to set up, because I don't want too much attention to be called. But I'm going to start from 1200, and I'm going to go not to 1100. You could now if you wanted to make this really look big, but we're going to go with 200 increments. So I see where my little red dot is, my little red line, and I'm going to put it right on 1000, and I'm going to drop it. Just make sure it goes off the canvas at about 1000. Doesn't have to be exact, and remember, we have to left click a second time. That's a new addition also to Windows 7, because it actually allows you, once you drop your line, you can actually modify it a little bit. Then I'm going to go to 800, make sure I make it go off the canvas, and that little dot there tells me that if I make a mistake, it's actually going to move it. So I hit Control Z to put that into place. Alright, so now I'm going to again start from that vanishing point, and again I'm going off at 800. Check to make sure my 800 is marked. Left click, and sometimes you'll get that little residual dot from left clicking, but that's okay. We can always hit Control Z to make it disappear. Now we've got 600 dead up the middle, and we'll go to 400 right there. Left click. Again, all from the same vanishing point. This is 1-point perspective hallway. Left click. Alright, and Control Z to clean up that little dot that's left there. But that's going to be good. That's going to show us our ceiling tiles. Now the first one we're going to start at, we're going to go to about, we know that the ceiling tiles are approximately 2 feet by 4 feet. Okay, so we're going to make these a little bit longer, so they're going to be rectangles in the ceiling tile. So what I'm going to do is come down to approximately, I'll start at 100. And I'm going to drag this across holding the shift key down. Okay, I'm going to hold the shift key down. And then what I'm going to do is from this corner, I'm going to actually do this in perspective. I'm actually going to find out by using this line right through the center line. I need it to cross through the center line where my next line should start. Alright, so I cross through the center and I position it so this line goes through that right here, through this center line. Has to cross there. When you get it, what you're going to do is see where your position is, and I'll notice that it's right here at about 150. So that's where my next one starts. So I can just hit Control Z. Just make sure you make a note of that number. Control Z. Start at 150. Hold the Shift key and come across. And then we're going to start from this point. Go through the center again. Through the center. Over. Make sure it's along the center and it's in position. And we notice that it's one less than 200. 1 point less, or one increment less than 200. So we're going to actually Control Z to make sure my cursor is positioned at 200 when I draw my next line. So Shift and go across. Now that's going to make sure that each of these gets smaller at the appropriate increment. That's how perspective design works in this way. Again, we're going to go across the center line to here, and we're now at 1, 2, 3 points below 200 where we'll start our next line. Control Z, right about there. Hold the Shift key, drag it across. And again, that makes it disappear at the correct angle. And we'll just continue this way. Across the center. Alright, and just make a note of where that ended. Right there. Okay, Control Z. Again, starting point across the center. Left click. Control Z to get rid of it. Start it right there. Hold the Shift key. Now this inevitably has to end. So we're going to decide how far we want this to end. So I'm going to take a rectangle tool. And I'm actually going to make a second line thickness. So we're going to put the hallway, the end of the hallway down here. So I'll probably make it about this big. So I'm actually going to start at the corner. And we want the rectangles to meet at all the corners. So like this. Alright, so that this corner, this corner, this corner, and this corner are all along those first 4 perspective lines that we drew. When you have that, you're good to go and you can actually click outside of it. And then what we'll also do is we'll add a second one, just a little bit shy of that. And that will represent the interior wall. So we'll just bring that one across. And these are simply going to be braces marking one part of the hallway against the other part. Alright, very good. Now we do need these lines back here continuing because we're actually going to draw quite small and we're going to actually put a hallway back here. In fact, what you can do at this point is put another rectangle right in here, and that's going to disappear. That's going to be another hallway that disappears into the background. Okay, and then another hallway. Or actually, we'll put a doorway on this other side. Okay, so that's basically going to get us set up pretty nicely. Alright, we got to continue these ceiling tiles, so let's go back and select first line thickness. And again, oops, Control Z, I grabbed the wrong one. Since we're drawing rectangles, we're not at all sure exactly where they go. So this line from the one before has to cross through the center of the last one we drew. And that tells us where our starting point is. So once we have that positioned, we can hit Control Z and then start from that point, holding the Shift key to drag a line across. And again, you can always erase if you need to. So again, we go to the one before, the antecedent, and we draw a cross through the center of the one that we're working on to find the position of the next one. When we're in position, let go, hit Control Z, hold the Shift key, and simply move it across. And that's the process here. So that again takes a little while, but it makes the drawing look really sharp. Control Z, hold the Shift key, and drag across. Left click, Control Z to get rid of that. So again, I start with the antecedent, drag across the center until I get to the position. Control Z to undo it, but hold it still, hold Shift, and drag across. And one last one ought to do it. Through the center. Control Z, hold the Shift key, and drag across. Okay, very good. Now this does need to continue through this area down here, but we should probably zoom in to get that done. So let's go ahead and zoom in right here. And I zoomed in twice. Go back to my line tool, and I'm actually going to start right about here. Again, holding the Shift key all the way across. Then I click, left click and drag, go through the center point. Control Z, left click and drag, holding the Shift key until it's across. Then I click. Then again, I find my next position by just working my way all the way across. Look at how perfect that is. Good. And then Control Z after I let go, hold the Shift key and drag across. And at this point, that's going to get too small. We don't even need to continue. You can continue if you would like to, but I'm going to stop right there and zoom back out. So we've got a nice ceiling grid. Now again, that was done using a single line, but as you know, if you look at the ceiling tiles, they're a little bit thicker. So we're going to actually add another line to this just to make it look a little more realistic. We're going to actually add to each of these, we're going to add another line starting from our vanishing point. They're not too thick. We could go to the inside or to the outside. I'll just go to the outside one notch here. Okay, and I'll do this all the way across. Then I left click again, Control Z to get rid of that. From my vanishing point, left click, come out one notch. What I mean by one notch is right here, this little notch. Okay, again, left click, starting from my vanishing point, one notch. Left click, starting from my vanishing point, one notch. Okay, and we'll just continue just like that from the vanishing point, one notch to the right, And that looks pretty good. I think we'll leave the last couple. Okay, so go back to your line tool. Make sure you've got your first line thickness, because we are going to continue sketching from this vanishing point. And what we're going to do is decide the tops of the doors. How high should the tops of the doors be? And I would say, if we think of these as about a foot each, 1 foot each, this increment from 800 to 700 as about a foot, that would make this corridor about 8 feet tall. If every 100 is 1 foot, so if we had about an 8 feet tall doorway, I think they're actually 7.5. So if we came up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that would bring the doorway pretty close to the top. So let's go ahead and make that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5, maybe 7 feet tall. I think that'd be good. 7.5, I think, would just be a little bit too high for us. So 7.5 feet tall. Same thing will be true to the opposite side. So I'm just going to make sure I extend this off the page. And again, you can still move it. And that looks pretty good right there. And let's do another one. Left click. And again, we could still reference our point right over there. And that looks like it's going to be about right about there. Okay. So we know where our doorways, how tall our doorways could be, and how tall the lockers can be. And then let's see what else we'll need. We're also going to need a line on each side. 1 line thickness. That's going to represent where the handles are for the lockers. And we're going to put that at about, well, let's just go over to this side. 1, 2, probably 3 feet high would be about where the handles are for the lockers. So if I bring that off at about 500, and again, these are not set. You can modify these to look any way you want them, but I'm going to use, just for a practical, to make it easy and make it uniform, I'm going to put 1 on each side. So that would represent about 3 feet. This line is about 7 feet high, and then there's another foot or so if this was an 8 feet tall hallway, and that would make this a 12 feet wide hallway. Okay, so we've got some good markers at this point, and so now what we're going to do is just continue to add some elements. We're going to add a doorway and a window and perhaps even a little bit of a water fountain. Alright, let's go ahead and try that. So at this point, what I'm going to want to do is begin with a doorway, and I'm going to leave myself some room here. In fact, I'm going to come out to about here to begin my doorway. Now that's going to be at about, if you're following along with my numbers, it's going to be about 400 and let's see, 10, 20, 30, 40, about 440. And I'm actually going to change the size of my line, change the thickness of my line to a size 2. Oops, Control Z. Did you see what happened there? I have to go back, change the line thickness to 1, and draw that 3 foot high line again. So right there until my red point reaches 500 over on my left hand ruler, then I let it go so I know exactly how tall this is. Then I'm going to left click again. Alright, and so again I'm going to put a door somewhere about halfway down the hall towards us, and so I'm going to actually use the second line thickness now, and I'm going to do what looks good to me. I think somewhere around 440 looks pretty good. So I'm going to hold the shift key, and I'm going to go to the top of where my door would be, which is that where that 7 foot line meets. Left click, and then I'm going to bring it towards us about that far, the width of a door. Left click, and then again hold the shift key down and bring it down until it meets the bottom line. And that'll represent our doorway. Now, to make it look real, we're going to have to zoom in a little bit, focus on this door for a couple minutes. And we're going to zoom in, go back, make sure we have the second line thickness, which happens to be a 3-pixel line. Hold the shift key, and we're going to move it in because we know the foot of our door moves in. I'm going to actually arrow key it in a little bit more so it lines up a little more perfectly here. Left click, then start my next line. Hold the shift key up to the top, let go, and then from here hold the shift key across back to the front, just like that. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to take this line and draw it from the corner of my rectangle across parallel to this line, and that's going to make it look again like an inset doorway. So at this point I can take my eraser tool, clean that up a little bit, again position it like I like to do is position it, and then I left click, as you can see. Okay, and that cleans it up real nicely, and we can actually take out this floor line as well. That might also clean it up a little bit. Okay, then I'm going to add another line, making sure I select the right, oops, that's my eraser, I better select my right tool. This is going to be the line tool, and I'm going to select the second line thickness, make sure that's selected, good, and then I'm going to left click from the bottom corner and again bring that off right about there, just above, so it's a little bit higher than the floor because we want it to look like the whole door is inset. And then right about here, which we said was about our 3 feet high mark, I'm actually going to add a small oval for my handle. Now if you don't want a handle that's an oval, you can use, I'm sure a rectangle would work, or whatever you think would work best. I'm going to use just an oval, and that might be pretty good. That looks like a pretty good oval. Now the beauty of this is I can actually move it up and down, but I think somewhere around that 3 feet mark is going to be best. And then I'm going to add a window, and again I want it to be congruent to this plane that we're on. And so when I add this window, I'm going to use the straight line tool, and I'm going to keep it just inside the handle of this doorway, and I'm going to hold the shift key, draw my line up, and left click. Then I'm going to again make sure that this line is parallel to this line here. Parallel. Something like that. Left click. Hold the shift key again. Now remember, since this is below our horizon line, it's going to angle down quite a bit. It's actually going to disappear right over there at the horizon line, or at the vanishing point. So I can move that up a little bit, back and up, and that looks pretty good. So that'll be my window. And to make it look like a window, I can take a couple of these little lines and just scratch those in pretty good. A couple diagonal scratch lines makes it look like a window. Put another one up here. Alright, that gives it the feeling of a window pane. Alright, so that's our first doorway. Let's go ahead and zoom out and see how that looks. Alright, that looks pretty good. So we've got the doorway in place. Now, what we could do is, using the same type of technique, we can actually add a window. And so we'll use, again, the second line thickness, straight line tool. And I know outside of my classroom I actually have a display case, and so as soon as you walk out and take a right out of my classroom, you see a display case. So I'm going to actually put that in because it's what I'm familiar with. If you want to draw a picture of your own hallway that you have at your school, that's fine too. But mine is going to be modeled after my own hallway. Alright, I'm going to left click, Bring this across. Now I want to leave room so I can put a drinking fountain in, because there is a drinking fountain and my students love to go to the drinking fountain. And so I want to make sure I include that. Oops, Control Z. Make sure I include that in my drawing. Hold the Shift key down to our 3 feet high mark. Left click again, and then find the tip. Come back. Alright, and we're going to do the same thing here. In fact, I could actually show you a little trick. If we use the rectangle tool instead, making sure our second line thickness is selected, use the rectangle tool, you can actually make those indents even farther if you want to. Control Z, undo that. But starting from the corner, you can make that indent really far, like a display case, which we'll do in a little bit, but we're going to make the first part of the display case just like this. Left click, then I change the line thickness, and I'm actually going to change the line to the line tool, keep the second line, and then we're going to go from this corner off here, just adding it somewhat parallel to that first one, and then also here at the top, from the top corner, somewhat parallel, so that it looks like it's inset. Alright, and then there's another little neat trick. We're going to actually make the display case look like there's actually something in there. So we're actually going to start here. Oops, that's the wrong tool. Control Z. Use that rectangle tool. Position it right into this corner. And I used a smaller line thickness because I want it to be diminished because of the fact that it's inside of a case. I want it to look like it's inside rather than anything else. I want it to look like the case is inset. Okay, so then I'm going to go back to my line tool, make sure it's a 1 line thickness. Starting at the corner, again, I would have to go back, making sure it's drawn from my vanishing point, just like this, and then this line would go through here, and actually I can draw it from the vanishing point and then take this and bring it right close, right to where it should stop, just like that. Alright, beautiful. Now let's go ahead and zoom in and see if we can't make this look a little bit more like a window, or a display case with a window in front of it. Grab my line tool, I'm going to go to the 1 line thickness, and I'm actually going to draw some, and I'm holding the Shift key down to constrain my line. So you'll notice I'm holding the Shift key to constrain my line, and I'm going to put a couple of these 45-degree angle lines across the front of this, again to give it that effect that it actually has a window pane in it. Okay, once I've done that, to even spruce up the effect even more, because we know that there's some glare when we look at windows, and when we look at this display case from the side, there's some glare, and so I'm actually going to take my eraser tool. I'm actually going to kind of just randomly run it through these lines, because you're actually going to see some glaring effects. And just going to separate this here, and that looks pretty good. You might see some glare through that line too. So these are a little bit broken, and that's the point. We want those to look a little broken so that the viewer can make out that this is a display case, but also that there may be some glaring on the window pane in front of it. So I think that looks pretty good. Subdues it just enough so it looks like it's inside glass. Okay, that looks pretty good. Alright, so I guess we can still work on the fountain. So we're going to put in a water fountain. So I go back to my line tool, grab the second line thickness, and the fountain's going to be about the same height off the ground, at least, as this display case. So I'm going to use that to my advantage. Now this is going to be the inside of the water fountain. So again, I'm holding the shift key. Now ours is inset into the wall quite a bit. So I'm going to just continue. And again, what I can do, let me just show you that trick again for those of you using Windows 7 paint program. We can actually line up the actual vanishing point and then go back when the double arrow appears, just drag it right back to the point where it needs to disappear. Just like that before we click. So that's a nice feature in the Windows 7 paint program. Grab my eraser tool, come in, just get rid of that. So that's going to be the inside of the fountain. So what we need to do next is draw the outside of the fountain. So we're going to actually make that a little bit thicker. So I'm going to start probably down here somewhere to make it a little bit thicker. Holding my shift key again, go just above, left click, then again from my vanishing point, I'm going to drag across the top and come out on this side. Alright, and again I don't want to have to erase that line, so I simply hover over it till I see my double arrow, and then I grab and drag it back. Position it to the top and left click so that it's in position. Control Z to undo that little guy that's still dangling there, and I'm going to do the same at the bottom. And again, I'm going to approximate how far this goes and hover over the center, bring it down and let it go. Maybe bring it in a little bit. Alright, let's see how that looks. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to take from either the top or the bottom. I'll take it from the bottom and shift, hold the shift key. Very nice. Now again, if that just happened to be perfect, if it wasn't perfect, I would just go in my eraser tool and clean that up. Just like I'm going to do here in a second. I'm going to clean this area up in just a couple minutes actually. I'm not going to do that right now. Alright, next thing we need to do is zoom in because we're going to get a little more detail here. So we're going to zoom in on this drinking fountain here and have a little fun with it. Now, there are some parts, again, if we take the one line tool, we can drag in just to give it a little bit of depth. We can drag in a little bit and then click, hold the shift key from that point and bring it down because it's going to empty out underneath here. Okay, and then this point needs to actually be connected to our vanishing point. So fortunately I can see my vanishing point. So starting from my vanishing point, I left click, drag through this corner across, let go, and then go right back to the vanishing point, hover over that point and bring it right back to where we need it to end, which is right there. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now we do need to get rid of this guy right here, so let's just go ahead and click the eraser tool and get rid of that. That's where the actual fountainhead is going to be located. So I'm going to take, probably the best tool for this is going to be the curve line tool. And so I'm going to actually zoom in just a little more to the bottom portion of this, and I'm going to use this curve line tool, keep it on a 1 thickness, and I'm going to make, to the best of my ability, I'm going to draw a little fountainhead. So I'm holding the shift key now, I let go, and then remember I'm using the curve line tool, so I'm going to bring this out a little bit and then bring it across just to kind of round that off a little bit. Click, and I will use the straight line tool to close that to show where it actually should end, right there. Alright, and there's going to be a little hole where the water comes out here. And so I'll use my oval tool, and that's where the water's going to come out of. And there's usually a little kind of a lid here that comes over the top, and so I'll draw that again with my curved line tool. Hold the shift key down, drag across, and then let go. Left click up, something like this. Okay, and again that's going to make it look somewhat like a fountain. Then I'll do another one. So the water's going to come out of here, and this usually has a little bit of a Control Z. Usually has a little bit of a lid, so again use that same tool just to kind of make it look a little thicker. Left click again. It may take a little bit of time till you get it what it looks like, and you might want to go out to the water fountain and take a look at what it actually looks like, but I'm going to keep it like that, and I'm going to actually add another section to this, something like this, to make it look like it's into the wall a little bit. There we go. Alright, so again the water would come flowing out of here, but we need something to turn it on. So it actually come out, and then it would fall down into, the water comes out and spurts into here. So we need something to turn it on. Now ours actually have, I'm going to go to the straight line tool. Ours actually have and use the second line thickness. They actually have a bar. Kind of looks like this. I'm going to draw it parallel, and you kind of push the bar in parallel to the line above it. Left click, hold the shift key, left click, from that point right back, and actually while it's still selected I'm going to move it up and back, position it right where I want it, and then click outside again, and then hold the shift key and reconnect. Or actually on that line, let's Control Z. I'm going to undo that and use the curve line tool for this one. So I hold the shift key, bring it down, and then drag it out. And then left click. You'll see why in just a moment. Because I want it to look like shift key, let go. I want it to look like a bar that you have to push in. And so I'm going to take and draw with a little smaller line, draw a second line, a straight line. Oops, Control Z. Hold that shift key down, and then I'm actually going to put a couple of, oops, what is that? Alright, that looks better. Now I should get the straight line tool, just put a couple of glare marks on here, just for highlight effects. And again, that would be the bar that you push in to make the water come out. Alright, and actually if you want to make it look a little bit, put some highlight effects on it, we can actually put some highlight effects on it. Just like that. That'll give it some highlight. Alright. Very good. I think I'm happy with that right now. Let's go ahead and clean up while we're in here. We'll clean up some of these loose ends. Get rid of these lines that we don't need. Let's Control Z. Control Z. Be a little more careful. Clean up some of these extra lines that we don't need. Control Z. Alright, now that looks pretty good. And again, we can zoom around, take a look, make sure it's cleaned up the way we want it. But I think that's going to look pretty good just like that. Okay, we'll come down here to the bottom and go back to 100%, see what that's looking like. Oh, okay, that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Now while we're here, yes, we do need to clean up these lines. So let's go ahead back in and zoom in. We can actually start here by cleaning up this line right off the page. Clean up the tip of this line here, and then this line here. Really clean it up. Take your time, do this right. It'll pay off. It'll look really nice in the end. I'm going to drag my scroll bar down. Simply drag this across. Left click, left click. Keep this there for a moment, but I'm just going to separate it for now. Alright. Zoom back out and take a look. Okay, so this side looks pretty good. I would like to do a couple things. I'm going to take my straight line tool using the second line thickness, and I'm going to actually run a line right along just to thicken this up and make it look a little more realistic. That looks good. And then also from this corner, right off the page over here, that looks a little better. Makes it a little more substantial. And we do have some cleanup to do down here, but we'll do that when we get to the lockers. Alright, that looks pretty good. And then the bottom, we're going to need to clean up in just a little bit. So let's first of all start, we're going to put some lockers right in this area. So I'm actually going to zoom in. Right there. I'm going to zoom in so that we can work on this plane. And I'm going to take my rectangle tool and use the second line thickness. And I'm actually going to draw a set of lockers just outside my door that comes up, and it's going to come up to about that doorway. Oops, sorry. So just outside my door. Not too thick. We don't want a set of lockers out in the middle of the hall. So we're going to keep it kind of thin. Something like this. And that looks good for the first wall of the lockers. Then we're going to go back to the straight line tool and actually connect it to just above. And then bring this up, hold the shift key to connect it to the top of the lockers. This is how the lockers in my school look. That's why I'm making them look like this. This may look awkward to some of you, but this is how our lockers are designed. Alright, and then go back, clean that up. Control Z, Shift key, Shift key. There it is. And Shift. Let go. Alright, now I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom of the lockers. I'm going to grab from the center to this corner, and then while it's still selected, hover over it, left click, and bring it up to wherever you want the lockers to end. And I'm going to end the lockers out in front of this hallway, so I'm going to end them right here somewhere. Alright, then I left click. I'm going to do the same from the bottom back to the vanishing point, let go, bring it right to about here, right underneath my other line. Then hold the shift key and drag it up. Alright, and then this line gets connected back, Control Z. This line connects back also to the vanishing point, hover over it, and bring it back up. And then connect. Alright, that looks good. Now, we can clean up the front side. Now that line is actually going to represent, I shouldn't have done that, Control Z. That line's going to tell me where the handles go. So I'm going to get rid of this line and this line to make this look like a set of lockers. Alright, good. And I can grab my line tool again and just simply clean this up right here by holding the shift key. And same thing here, hold the shift key and drag. Use the arrow key to position it. And then we're simply going to put in some parallel lines. And I'm going to use the single line thickness on this, and I'm going to hold the shift key and bring those lines down and actually bring that across a little bit. And we don't have to, since these are kind of out of sight, we can actually play around with those a little artistically. And they don't even have to actually meet. And what we can do is just hold the shift key, and this will represent the handles and the locks, because we got to remember this, we're zoomed way in here, so they're not going to possibly be able to see all this. And so I can just continue this up, put it across. Alright, that's going to be good enough. Then I do want to clean some of this up, so I'm going to take my small eraser and I'm actually going to come in and clean that up a little bit. And again, it's okay to leave a little bit of line, again, to make it look a little more realistic. We don't even have to have complete lines here, so if I put a couple breaks in the lines, that's going to be fine. And that's going to allow me to paint into those last few lockers all the same color. Alright, very good. So now while we're here, let's go ahead and zoom in. Working our way right around, we're going to zoom in on this central hallway. And using the eraser tool now, I'm going to come in and try to clean this up. And remember, go back to your second line thickness, I believe is what we used here. Control Z. And that will clean that. And again, notice how when you just erase those lines, it actually makes it look real opaque, which means it's the opposite of transparent. Opaque means you can't see through it. Transparent means you can see through it. Opaque means you can't see through it. And so when we use the eraser tool, it makes the plane that we're working on look solid or opaque. So again, as we do this, it makes the bracing here that we're working on look more solid, more substantial. We can actually take this out because we don't need that. And it's okay to leave a little bit of dots there in the hallway, because you know the hallways aren't that clean, and plus it gives it a little bit of texture for our tiles that we're going to use. Now at this point, we are kind of deep into the picture, so let's go ahead and just erase. We're not going to make it as detailed as we will the portion of the hallway that's closest to the viewer, because that's where we want their eye to remain, is more close. This background is just more for the effect, and so we're going to clean this up a little bit. Not that it's not important, it is very important, but it does not have to be as detailed as something that we're drawing close to the viewer. So I'm going to redraw that line just a little bit. Okay, and what I'm going to do over here is get rid of, with my eraser tool, I'm going to actually get rid of this line. And I'm going to put another door in. Is that the smallest eraser I have? Yes, it looks like it is. So I'm going to take my line tool, using a single line thickness, and I'm going to put a door across from this hallway. This is actually going to be a hallway here. Sort of disappears, so you come down and you take a right. I'm going to put another door here, so I'm holding the shift key and I draw up to my line, which represents the top of our doorway, and then I draw a second line again to the top of our doorway, left click, and then I'm going to use the rectangle tool to inset that door by positioning it right here. You can inset that door, not too far, but just something like that. Okay, and then use my line tool to reconnect from here up parallel to the top line, and then one more time here at the base of the door in parallel. Alright, and then I'm going to zoom in one more time, see if I can do this. Zoom in, it'll let me. Yeah, it looks like it'll let me. And I'm going to take that eraser tool and actually get rid of this, which will solidify that wall. And I'm going to get rid of some of this that I don't need. And I don't need this right here either. But again, it's so far away at this point, it's not real important that we get rid of it. But I'm also going to get rid of this portion so that it seems that the hallway ends and takes a right. Okay, now let's go ahead and get rid of this while we're here, and get rid of this. Alright, and now one thing I haven't done yet is save this work. So let's go ahead and save. And we're going to call this 1 point perspective. 1 point perspective hallway. Alright, and then we're going to zoom back out. 1 point perspective hallway. Now that seems to be coming together pretty well. We've got the top plane completed and the left plane very well detailed. The right hand side, we could actually thicken this up a little bit just to make it a little more consistent. That's the only thing I would change, is to make the walls, use that a little bit, make that a little bit thicker to the vanishing point. And then the same thing here. And I think that's going to be a little bit better. Right to the doorway. And then right there. Yeah, something like that. I think that makes it look a little better. And it looks as if we can go down and we could take a right down a hallway over here. Or we can go into this door right here, and you could probably put a little dot there just for a doorway. Hold that shift key, make it look like a window. There we go. So we've got the doorway, a little window, a little hallway down at the end. Alright, so let's work on this right hand plane over here. Now across we can have another door, so we'll put this doorway a little bit closer down the hall, sort of offset. And again, I'm using the second line thickness, and I forgot I got to use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw my doorway just like this, going right up to the 7 feet point. I think that's what we called it. I think it was about 7 feet. Okay, and then go back and grab the line tool, and we can actually zoom in to do this. And grab the line tool, and we're going to continue this front end of the doorway, probably going to be about that wide. And then the bottom, well, let's go ahead and draw the shift all the way down to the bottom, left click, connect this back to here. And this point from the bottom corner, just to make it look inset, we're going to drag right to there. Good. And then from the top of the door, inset to there. And then again, we're going to need a handle. So let's grab the oval tool. Maybe even change the size of it a little bit. Grab a handle, put it in. And then a window. Oops, Control Z. I gotta go back to my straight line tool. Hold the window. And then again, follow my vanishing point. Bring it up. And then hold the shift key, bring it down. I'm going to make it purposely a little bit longer just because I'm going to find that vanishing point first of all. Bring it in there and then click up. And that should be good. And then I can clean that up with my eraser tool. Coming right back. Clean that up. Now let's zoom in a little bit. Fix this door up with the eraser tool. Let's go ahead and grab a... I'm going to make that handle a little bit thicker there. I think that's better. And go back, grab my line tool, one line thickness, and we'll put a couple of 45-degree. Hold that shift key down and add yourself a couple of these. There we go. That makes it look a little more like a window there. Control Z. And let's zoom back out. Come down to the bottom right. Zoom out to 100%. There we go. That looks pretty good. Although this window is a little bit thicker, so what we should do is actually zoom in and make that window consistent with the other window. So grab the line tool, make sure it's a second line thickness. Control Z. Hold that shift key. Click. Yeah, that looks better. Just like that. And actually, if you did the front ones, actually look even more realistic. Just leave it like that with that front one. That would make it look like you're looking around to the corner, and these are inset window panes. So I think that even looks better. Alright, so we'll keep that, and then maybe do the same thing over here. Get rid of, just to make it look consistent. Grab this and erase right down. And then use a single line. Get the line tool, make it a single line thickness, and then bring that down. And that's going to make it look a little more realistic, because this thickness will actually make it look like the window pane is inset just a little bit. So if we zoom back out, I think that looks a little better. So Control Z to undo that. Good, now we can add another set of lockers, which needs to come out into the hallway a little bit. So what we will do is we'll start with a rectangle just to set up the framework. And we'll use a one line thickness. Grab a rectangle starting from the corner. We'll come out as far as we want our lockers to go. Bring them up to about there. Alright, I think that's about right. Good. And then what I'm going to do is grab my second line thickness and grab my line tool, second line thickness, and coming from the vanishing point again, I'm going to go right across the top corner right here of this locker and bring it right off the page. So it has to touch that locker top. Good. Boom, right there. And then before it disappears, I'm going to come back, left click, and drag this and position it right where I want it, which is right on top of that corner. Then I can take and add the front. Hold that shift key. Front. There it is. And then again, from this corner, I come across so that I'm basically lining it up with this corner right here. So drag it off the canvas, line it up with that corner, let go, and before I click again, I'm going to come back and make sure I shape this line, bring it, trim it down so it ends right where I want it, which is right there. And then I can clean some of this up. I can actually zoom in, grab my zoom tool, and come over here and clean up this, because we're not going to be able to see through it. If this is a locker, we're not actually going to be able to see through it. So I want to get rid of this wall here so it looks like a solid wall. And get rid of this bottom line. And then we'll keep that center line just because we need to remember where the center of the lockers belongs. But then I can get rid of this. Let's take a bigger eraser. It makes it a little easier. And same thing here. Go right through that. Control Z, undo that. And I'll take this and get rid of this part. Again, let go of this. And then this can be disappear. We can get rid of this part. Alright, now that looks good. Now again, I see one thing that needs to be cleaned up, which is this line here. Should be redrawn. Perfect. Okay, and it looks like maybe this line could be redrawn as well. Alright, so what we're going to do is zoom back out. 100% good. Now we've got this set of lockers which appears to jet out from this side wall here. And we know that this is our center point. This is our 3 feet marker. So we know where the handles should go. So at this point, what we can do is draw in. Well, actually, let's go ahead and erase some of the stuff that we don't need. We don't need this. We don't need this because these are solid lockers. Okay, and we actually can get rid of some of that line because we don't actually need that whole line. Just enough of a sketch to remember where our handles should go. So I'm going to get rid of that too. Okay, so we know that's about the center of the locker where the handles should go. Let's go ahead and grab a second line thickness straight line tool now. We're going to start close to us, holding the shift key right down. Okay, and I'll teach you another trick. What you can do, let's say we want to fit 10 lockers across this span. Here's what we're going to do. 9 or 10. We'll see what we can do here. We're going to take this and grab the one line thickness tool again because we don't want these to be too long. Okay, if we go right across the center That is right there. That's the center. If we hold the shift key, we'll know right where the center is here. Okay. And then remember, come back and simply bring this back, holding that shift key down. Make sure that it stays perfectly straight right there. Okay, and then we're going to draw another line. If we make, let's divide this in half. Alright, and then remember where that was and go right back to it. Good. And then let's do this again in the bottom. Divide that in half. Divide that section in half between here and here. Bring this together. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to need more lockers than that, so let's go ahead and divide this bottom section in half. And remember to drag this across so we don't have to continue to mess with this vanishing point. Alright, and then again from the vanishing point, let's divide this one in half. You'll see what we're doing here in a second. It's a little trick to making these look realistic. And let's go ahead and divide this one in half, and again drag this up to where it was on that wall. Okay, that'll give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lockers at this point. Alright, so let's go ahead and add one more right here through the center. And remember to drag this. So the number of lockers that you want, you have to divide the plane. See this plane right here? We'll divide it by the numbers of lockers we want. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we're going to get 9 lockers. Then what we're going to do is take from this corner across to the bottom corner. Now you'll see why I did all this. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to take this intersecting line where each of these intersect and draw our locker lines. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Grab a second, Control Z that. We need that one line thickness again from corner to corner. Alright, and we're going to click off of that. Then we're going to change the thickness of our line because we want to make sure these are thick. So what we're going to do is right here where this intersects, we're going to actually draw a line right through it. Shift right through where it intersects. See, it intersects here. Line right through it. Boom. There's the first one. Then we're going to look at the next one. Here is where the line intersects. So I'm going to go right above that line. Now you can see I missed it just a little bit, but remember we can use the arrow tool to bring it right back into place. Alright, then we're going to look at the third one. It's right there. Hold that shift key down. Let's bring that over. And if you need to make it a little longer or shorter, you can do that. I just hold that shift key. Actually, a shift key doesn't really work. There we go. Good. Let's go ahead to the next one, which is right here. Hold the shift key, drag it down. And when you let go, just use the arrow key to reposition it. The next one goes here. So I want to make sure I'm starting right there. Good. So the next one starts here. Oh, I missed it a little bit. Got to bring it back to that intersection. So we're paying attention where these two lines, where this diagonal line meets each of these lines. We're actually drawing our next locker to keep them equally spaced in perspective. So here's where I'm going to start my next one. So I come down to the bottom, hold the shift key, drag up, left click, and then this is our last one right here. Hold the shift key right through the center. Good. So that's how we divide that up. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lockers, equally spaced out. Alright, so then we can come up, grab the zoom tool, and start to clean this up a little bit. See if there's an easier way to clean this up. I think if we take our selection tool, rectangle selection tool, and just select from here inside all this locker area, and then hit delete, it's going to clean it up a little bit easier than having to go in with our eraser tool and just erase everything. So again, you just simply select inside the locker, hit delete, select inside the locker, and hit delete. Select inside the locker, and if you need to go back and redraw some of these, you can. Delete. But it makes the cleanup job a little bit easier. Select inside the locker, hit delete. Select inside the locker, hit delete. So again, we're using our selection tool here. Alright. So I select just inside the locker, all the way across. Let me bring that up and delete it. Alright, zoom out. Select inside, oops. Control Z, let's go up here a little higher now. Selecting inside the locker. Hit delete. And then again, one more time, select inside the lockers. And hit delete. There we go, that cleans it up quite a bit. It takes a lot of the work out of it. We get those nice lockers. Alright, very good. So, it's okay to have some of those lines. Those lines aren't going to hurt us at all. Now remember, we need that 3 feet line, so I'm going to actually come back and grab my line tool so that I make sure all of my lines, and what did we say it was? 500 right there? Alright, so that looks like about it. So I'm going to drag that off. Now that's going to represent, and bring this over, let's see here. And that's going to represent the middle of the locker. So we can then come in using our oval tool. Alright, and we'll probably use a second line thickness for this. Using the oval tool, or maybe even use a rounded oval tool. That might even look better. Might even look more realistic. And then I'm simply going to create a locker handle on either side of these. Just like that. Now to make these, let me just redo this. To make sure that these are about the same size, again we're going to take, oops, Control Z, take the line tool and define the top edge. We want these in perspective, so I draw my first one and I use that as my guide. And then draw my next. Okay, so that's going to be my guideline there, and I'm just going to simply drag this over to here. And that tells me how tall I want these to be. So then I come back and grab my rectangle, rounded rectangle tool, and I can put those right here, making them a little bit smaller each time. Need to move it over a little bit, I can. Let's zoom in because it's getting too small here. Zoom in, grab my rounded rectangle tool. And then the last one. Alright. So then again, we can come in and clean that up a little bit using the eraser tool. Let's go ahead and make that as small as we can so we can get in here. And again, I'm not going to worry too much about being perfect in here because these are lockers. They are a little bit dingy, at least in the schools I've been in. They're not real clean. So I'm not going to worry too much about cleaning these up. In fact, it's going to give it more of a glare effect if we don't clean it up perfectly. So again, creates kind of a textured effect. Now that line I want to fix. And so I'm going to hold that down, shift. Then go back to my eraser tool, grab a little bit thicker eraser, and come across. There we go. And grab this. We're getting closer here. Good. Again, I'm not going to try to get it perfect. And zoom back out. Okay, so we can see some of these lines here. It's not gonna be a problem. Let's see. What I do need to do though is, just like these have a top, I'm gonna have to add that top in. So we're gonna take this second line thickness and add just like so, and then from our vanishing point right across the top of the lockers, right off the page. And then before I click again, I'm going to come back and grab the tool and bring it up to where I want it to end, which is right there. Alright, that looks good. So we've got our lockers in place, very rhythmic look to the lockers, and drinking fountain. The last thing we're going to work on before we color this is the lines in the hallway and the floor lines. Now, I don't exactly want to make it look, I could make it look just like the ceiling tiles with checkerboards on the bottom. So this is how I would do that. Again, I would draw my lines. Now these are going to be a little bit smaller, and I'm going to use, what I'm going to use is my vanishing point and the lines of the locker. Okay, and then click. I'll divide this in half by coming straight down with a shift key, and then I'm going to take the distance between the center and this point, and I'm going to estimate the halfway point. And so again, I click off from my vanishing point, again halfway between this point in the center and this point over here. I would say it's going to be right in there. And again, I'm visually estimating. I'm not going to make this mathematically precise in this case. I'm just visually estimating, and I figure each of these could be divided in half one more time. So if I come down the center of these two, this one and this one, that looks good. Left click, come down the center of these. Again, left click, come down the center, and again, this is a visual estimate, not an exact number. Okay, and then it would just simply be a case of crossing these lines just like we did on the lockers, just like we did on the ceiling. We could do this a couple different ways. We could actually go from this corner here, and or from this corner. Let's try this. If we go from this corner, well, that's not really going to work. Let's go ahead and undo that. Control Z. What I would say, the best way to do it would be to establish your first one, your first line. And I would keep these as a 1 point because, again, we don't want them to be too distracting to the viewer. And then from the corner of the preceding one, if we go across this center point, right through the center to the other side, right through the center, so that this point hits the center. Okay, just make sure your cursor is there, hit Control Z, and that's where you'll start your next line. Hold the Shift key and bring it across. Then you can left click. So again, we start at the antecedent line, the one right before, bring it through the center. When we have it positioned where we want, we let go, Control Z to undo, and while we're still in that position, hold the Shift key. And that's going to keep these in perspective to one another. So again, I go to the line before, through the center point here, and across. Make sure it crosses through the center. Control Z, hold the Shift key, and bring it across. Okay, so this is going to take you a little while to do, but if you do it right, it's going to look really good. Control Z, hold the Shift key, and drag across. Through the center, Control Z, hold the Shift key, and drag across. Through the center point, diagonally, Control Z, hold the Shift key, and drag it across. Again, starting at the antecedent intersection, through the center point, and across, Control Z, hold Shift, and drag across. Alright, so after it gets to that point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little more loose with my lines. I'm just going to hold the Shift key, and I'm not going to draw every single line. I'm actually going to skip and just make it a little more loose, a little less intricate. Oops, Control Z. But I am going to hold the Shift key down and make these Control Z. I am going to hold the Shift key down and make them somewhat flat, and actually make that look like it disappears into the hallway. Control Z. Alright, and so again, we don't need to make them all that perfect unless you really want to. That's how you would do it. Like I showed you these first ones, that would be the perfect way to do it, but again, we're not gonna take the time to do that in this video, but you can certainly do that if that's up to you. I teach you the technique and you can actually apply it. And what I'm going to do over here is, again, just basically come in, and I'm actually going to spruce this up a little bit by using the eraser tool. And I'm actually going to erase a bunch of this so that it actually looks more like a hallway. Going to get rid of some of these lines here. Let's zoom in and use the eraser tool just to clean this up a little bit. I still want it to be somewhat, I want to see some of these lines, but actually not all of these grouped together. Actually, a lot of this can go. And again, this is going to be implied texture. If I erase some of it, it's going to be implied. The viewer's going to see enough of it to know that this is a tiled hallway. So again, I can actually erase quite a bit of this. And it actually makes it look a little bit more like there's some glare on the hallway by erasing frequently. So again, that's sort of intuitive. You're going to have to figure out what looks best in your picture. Whether you want to draw every single line, that's going to be up to your teacher. Actually, they're going to tell you whether they want you to draw every single line or whether they want you to do more of the glare effect like I'm adding here by just adding these diagonal lines. Looks more like a glare. And if you don't like it, you can always, again, save a different version by clicking on Save and then go to Save As. And we can always, what I always like to do is once I have the actual drawing, I actually like to save it as the next version. So I'm going to put V2 and click on Save, and that way when I start to color it, I'm not coloring the original, and I can actually do this several times. So let's go ahead and just look at the coloring for a little bit. Now, to color this, remember what can happen. If you're going to color anything black, like let's say we wanted to color the tiles black, if I just simply come over and click on black and then grab the paint bucket tool and click black, the problem with that is that if you ever change your mind and want to change that black to another color, watch what happens. Let's say I want to change that black to a green, and then I change it to a green. Notice what happens. Every line that was black and connected to that black square now turns a different color, and that can be a huge problem if you don't know what to do. So what I'm going to tell you to do is, first of all, hit Control Z. If that ever happens to you, Control Z until you're back to where you belong. And again, that's another reason to save this as a second version. Notice I'm using version 2 so that if I ever mess up, I could go back and I could open up version 1 and save it as a version 3, just so I don't mess up my original version. But back to what I was saying, if you want to use black, what I would recommend is going into your edit colors and simply dragging this value tone into this area right in here, where you're going to get it dark enough it's going to look black, but it's actually going to be what they call a gray. So actually, if you even just drag it up slightly, drag this up slightly, you'll get a gray tone that looks like black. Okay, and that's it right here. And it's actually, if you hover over, it's called gray 80%. So if you left click on that color with color 1 selected, then go and grab your tool, and you were to do the same thing, you see it looks black. However, if I go to change it to another color such as red, it's not going to destroy the rest of my drawing. So again, that's just a tip. You can take it or you can leave it. I'm going to go back and use use gray instead of black to color. If you're going to do black tiling, that's fine. And again, you can kind of make this look pretty cool. And again, you don't have to do every single tile, but and again, if you do that, it's going to color the whole thing. So if you happen to hit the wrong thing, just hit Control Z. What I'm going to do is just a few tiles here and there to give it the effect, and maybe a couple over here. And again, I want to pick ones that are closed, because if they're not, it's going to mess me up. So again, I do a few here in the foreground, and then this set. Okay, and the people can see the rest. And in fact, I might even go in and add more of a gray to the rest of the hallway. Maybe that's a little too dark. Control Z. I might even add more of a light gray. And you can play around with that just to make it look realistic. Now you notice it bled in down here a little bit. Now it becomes a problem. So what we have to do is zoom in. I don't want that wall to turn the same color as my floor necessarily. So what I'm going to do is grab my line tool and just, you see what happened, there's a little leak right here. So I'm actually going to Control Z. I'm going to use a black for color 1. Make sure I've got my second line thickness. Hold the not hold the shift key, but just drag this back, actually move it up a little bit. Okay, and that's going to be good. Control Z. Go back to right down here to the bottom left. Zoom this back out. Now for my doorways and for my windows, maybe I want to use a blue. So I'm actually going to select a blue, and then I'm going to go into my edit colors. And here I have a lot more control over the exact blue that I want. I'm going to actually take more of a light blue, make this hallway a little bit brighter, and just go with a very light tint of blue, something more along those lines. Click on OK, and then select my paint bucket tool, and I can actually color in anything that is glass like this to make it look more like a glass enclosure. And then for my walls, I might keep those something similar. I'm not sure what color I want to do the walls. Maybe more of a beige. So if I go in, I can again use I can lighten up the beige, or I can make it even more dark, and that's up to you. You're going to want to play around with this. This is the fun part, is playing around with these different colors. And again, this is great because what you can do is go in and save this as different versions. So let's say I'm going to make this blue, and again go back to my beige for the hallway colors. Okay, and what I can do at this point is again go in and save, save as, and just create a version 3 by just changing V2 to V3. And so in version 3 I may want to change my colors so that I have all these different versions. Now I can change these colors over to green if I want to try a green hallway, see what that would do to my students, or even green and beige back here. Again, I can make this as psychedelic as I want to. So then if I go in and save as, I'm going to see there's my original, and there's perspective version 3, perspective version 2, save as version 4 now, and save as many versions as you want. So then when you go in and you look up here, you save as, you're going to see this version too. So you'll see your original 1-point perspective hallway, version 2, version 3, version 4, and again if you wanted to you could save a version 5. And I'm just going to push cancel there and get back to the coloring. Now for my door, maybe I want actually I like the color of the walls better before, so I'm a little more mellow than that, so I'm going to use some mellower colors on my doors and on my walls. Maybe I don't know, a light blue, or maybe a purple be nice in here. There we go. That's a little nicer. I like that. And then for my doors, maybe the trim, go back and use this slate gray for the trim. Alright, maybe a slate gray for this handle here, and on each side of this little water fountain. Alright, something like that might look good. Just maybe a slight variation of this gray. If I take this same slate gray and go in and again lighten it up with my value scale here, push OK, and I can actually make that a little bit darker. Okay, maybe the top should be slightly darker itself, but I'm going to change that. Control Z. I'm going to make that a little bit darker than what I had here. So I go in, I edit my colors, drag this down a little bit. Actually, I could drag it down here, push OK. And there it is. Gives it a little three-dimensional look and feel. I am going to change this a little too as well. So I'm going to change that more like the glass color, but not quite. I'm going to edit that maybe a little more aqua. Click on OK. And there it is. So again, it makes the whole thing look a little more three-dimensional. Brings out the white on the highlights here and on the outside. But again, this is all up to you. You can color it any way you want to, or according to the specifications that your teacher gives to you. For the doorways, maybe I make them the same color as this purple color. Or lavender, I guess they call it. Maybe the doorways are lavender. And again, slate gray. Perhaps inside here, give it a slate gray. Now here's what happens. If you're not careful, you might end up hitting the lines. If you hit the lines and it turns the lockers blue, or if you hit the lines and it turns something blue, then just hit Control Z to undo that, because you don't want that. You just want to make sure right away you hit Control Z. Now the lockers, it looks like we've got a pretty good palette here. It's a pretty cool palette, kind of mellow. So what I might do is come in and add somewhat of a warm locker color. Let's try, I don't know how deep I want to go, probably something like more of this burgundy tone, or I might even come over here. That's a little bit, I like this, or maybe that. Some of that deep. Actually, this is a nice color. Well, you can play around with the colors. Pick the one that you like. I kind of like that deep burgundy color, but I'm going to come over here and grab it. And then click OK. And so for my lockers, I can actually color each of these, or I could even get fun with it and use color number 2. Alright, maybe I want to make this the second color 2. So then I just left click on this one, right click, left click, right click, left click, right click. I can actually have fun with this, make alternating patterns. Alright, maybe for the tops, add that red to the top. And kind of make it fun like that. And then it would be the right click color there. And for these, maybe make them a brown or a gray inside these handles. Uh-oh. That was color 2. So I have to Control Z and undo that. So color 2, I would right click inside of each of these. And again, you may have to find you're using the zoom tool, which is perfectly fine. And then go back to your paint bucket tool and just make sure the tip of that paint bucket is inside the color you want. This gets a little tight right in here, so I'm going to hit Control Z. I'm going to leave that one alone. Control Z. You have to zoom in a little more and then use that paint bucket tool again. Right click right inside there. It's a little tight, but I got it. Control Z. Control Z, that's not going to make it. Let's go ahead and just paint this then. Control Z, that Control Z comes in handy. Control Z. It's not letting me do it. There we go. Alright, I'm going to zoom back out to 100%, and it's starting to look pretty good. So again, I could change the color of the lockers if I want to. Pick 2 more colors, maybe a pink for that right click color, and maybe an orange for the left click color. So I left click, then I right click, left click, right click, and there I have it. Maybe an orange for the top. So again, it's up to you how you want to do this. Maybe an orange doorway, brighten it up a little bit. And again, you can zoom in, change this up if you want to. And again, you could even have fun with the tiles. I would probably recommend, at least for these runs, to use more of a blue-gray, something like this. Control Z. So what happened there is I have a leak right in there, and I can see it. So if you find that when you click inside and color it leaks out, it means you have a leak. And so I can see it. It's right up here. My lines either weren't thick enough. So I hit Control Z, I grab my line tool, and I'm going to zoom in and check on those. And sure enough, it never made it off. I'm just going to go to the one line tool again. Control Z, click on black, and just drag that off the page completely. Drag it off the page completely, and that should fix the problem. So that when I go in with my paint bucket tool and use more of a light gray color, I get that nice color there. Alright. Oops. Oh, that's one way to do it. Control Z. Alright, so again, zoom back out. Okay, looks pretty good. So again, that's going to be up to you. You can color these any way you want to. Those are just some of my suggestions. I think that looks pretty good right there. Alright, so I'm going to leave that, save it. And that was version 4. Again, you can always go back and save as another version. So I've got version 4, version 3, version 2. Reopen one of your other versions and play around with different color schemes until you get it just the way you want it.